So, obviously you guys are here to learn about some tax server. Quick introduction, my name's Abram Gallegos. I work for Chesapeake Technology International. We are partnered with the Product Center, and if you guys have seen the TACX demos and seen Cassie and our Nate talk about TACX, tax mounted, things of that nature, that's definitely something that we support. We also support a lot of the training sessions for tax server, WinTAC, ATAC, things of those nature. A little bit about myself. I know you guys are probably used to like Izzy. He's been doing it for the past couple of years, teaching tax server, does an awesome job. A little bit about myself. Previously, I was a former Navy, did all my time with NSW. Got out, worked for SOMPI as a SOMPI MPSC. Ended up shifting over and got picked up by CTI. So it worked out to be a good deal. It's a good company. So today, just to give you guys like a brief overview of kind of what we're going to talk about today, is just basically getting you guys spun up and understanding how to like spin up your own tax server, whether it's in a virtual environment or if you want to do it on what you would call like a bare metal environment, where you just basically squirt up a new operating system. That's another way you can do it. But also at the same time, if you're doing testing or you're running on like an ESXi, there's massive servers going on, you can also virtualize the environment. So just a quick overview of the virtualization. We're not going to do a whole virtualization class, because there's so many different flavors out there. It just depends on what your organization is comfortable with you using or what you're comfortable using. So, but for the purposes today, I'm kind of just going to lean towards VirtualBox because it's free, everybody can get it, and it's stupid easy to use. So, without further ado, let me just go ahead and get going through it. As I said, we're probably talking about a lot of this virtualization. How you're going to set it up, when you might set it up, like I said, would definitely be in an environment to where you can't just run a physical machine, or you can run it in AWS, Azure, different cloud environments. You can also run it on ESXi servers. You can run it on VMware. You can run it on Hyper-V. So there's a lot of different ways you can run these virtualizations. And one of the cool things about virtualization is that you don't really have to be so finicky about, like, if you make a mistake or you completely destroy that system, then you can snapshot that previous like little space and time of your container and just back it straight up to before you actually did whatever you did that you can't figure out. So that's one of it's a good training tool to utilize, especially if you're doing testing, development, or just trying to get familiar with using Linux, Ubuntu, or anything of that nature. So highly recommend just going to town on one of these things and breaking it. So some of the file transferring software that we would be using is WinSCP. So if anybody's familiar with WinSCP, it's just a standard SCP file transfer, FTP protocol transfer. You basically just jam in your IP address, and then from there, you can transfer files back and forth between different environments, different machines, virtual environments, and it's a really easy way to just, instead of having to plug in like a USB and then take that out and pull it into something else or burn a disk, for some of you that have to enjoy that, it's a good way to actually get your files pulled back and forth between different environments. Also, towards the end of this, we'll probably talk about a little bit of the Linux commands that you should be familiar with, because using tax server, you may forget to do some things in just basic Linux, like just commands that you would need to understand, like, oh, well, I did this, let's figure this out. So a lot of different text editors out there that you can use. One of my personal favorites is Notepad++. All right, so it's kind of the same thing, but on Windows. You can put it on different operating systems as well. You can do XML files. There's all kinds of different file formats you can use. So, how many of you guys are actually familiar with tax server? Let me just ask that question. All you guys, spinning up your own tax servers and rocking and rolling, and okay, cool, awesome. So, like I was talking about previously, Israel Anna, he did a phenomenal job going very in-depth on virtualization of machines. That is, like, his previous instructions are on the Product Center website. So you guys can always jump on there and reference it. I'm going to try to get kind of into the meat and potatoes of like actual tax server and getting that up and running for you guys. After talking about virtualization, that's really what it is. It's just, it's using a lot of like your own machine's resources, and you can just do multiple different type of operating systems. So it's a good little playground tool. So it does use a lot of resources depending on what you're doing for your computer. So if you have like, you know, a gaming computer, you're not gonna have to really worry about it. But the more VMs you drop on there and the more like hardware allocation you're giving it, just be cognizant of that. Especially if you start running a tax server on like a laptop, like one of these laptops, and you're pushing and pulling massive amounts of data, it's gonna crush your machine. So just be cognizant of that. So let's just jump through here. So just for all of everybody out in VTC land, you know, we're also going to be talking about and actually walking through this and spinning up a machine on like VirtualBox. And hopefully, since I only have, can you guys still see that? Yeah. Some of us older people can't really see things too good anymore. So, but basically, we made it as easy as possible for everybody to follow along with. Basically, step by step, right? Just step by step. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and spin up our first virtual machine. I've already got a lot of different snapshots on here from other virtual machines, just because it's sometimes whenever you're, you know, like actually loading a new operating system, it can take a while. Like if you're like just loading that ISO up, it could take up to an hour sometimes to actually provision out the entire VM and then wait for it to pull its updates and all that other good jazz. But just for demonstration purposes, we'll go ahead and walk through it today. So first thing you're going to do, open it up, you're going to click New. And when I'm talking about VirtualBox, I still want to kind of point out that like with any other VM software, it's pretty much the same. Like it doesn't matter if you're using VMware, you know, Hyper-V. There's a couple little extra commands you got to do in Hyper-V on Windows itself. Not a big deal, but the overall idea and gist of how you actually do this, it's the same across all of them. So it translates over very well. So from here, we're just going to type up our new VM. We'll just call it CentOS 7 install. Then from here, what you're going to do, you're going to figure out where you want to save this VM. So like on mine, I'm running off an external hard drive because I don't want to just eat up a lot of actual hard drive space on my computer. You can do that. Just, you know, it will eat up a lot of memory. So for mine, I'm just going to go down here, click Other, and map it to basically wherever I want. And from here, external drive, and we'll just say here. Click on the VMs. And then from there, we're just going to click Next. We're going to go through and actually figure out how much memory we want. I know on the recommended settings, it does say 8 gigs. For our purposes, we can get away with running the 4 gigs. So you just basically take your slider, pull it all the way over, and that's just how you're going to tell it how much memory you want to allocate. We'll just go ahead and drop it right around there. From there, you're going to click Next. And then from here, we're actually going to just create a new hard disk. So you do have the option if you want to like add it, you know, not add a hard disk, you can do that. Or you can also say, hey, I want to create a hard disk from an existing, you know, like machine that I've already made previously. You have that option of doing that. And from here, you would just go in and figure out wherever you saved it. So like on mine, I have everything on my external drive. So and those are all my previous hard drives that I've already made. So for our purposes, I'm just going to create a brand new one. Going to click Create, and then here is the VirtualBox disk image. I'm going to go ahead and use the VDI image. However, if you're going to later on transfer this out of VirtualBox and load it up onto like an ESXi or something of that nature, be cognizant of what other virtual machine environment you're going to be transferring it over to. So basically, if you want to use like, you know, the, you know, VMD or VHD, different virtual environments take the different formats. Just be cognizant of what you're gonna, hey, I wanna export this later. Let's just go ahead and make it like this. But for here, we'll just use the virtual disk image. And we'll go to fixed size. You can dynamically allocate it. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with basically your disk size and things of that nature. It grows with it, but I don't want to like just bog everything down. So we're just going to call it fixed. Click next. Now from here, we're going to go ahead and say, this is actually just kind of, since we're saying fixed, we need to tell it how fixed we want it, how big we want it. So we're gonna go ahead and move this on over to at least 40 gigs of like hard drive space. So think of this as basically your actual hard drive on your machine. So 40 gigs, roundabout there, usually works very well. Basically it sits there, let it spin, let it create. However long it wants to figure its life out. So, but once this gets done creating its own virtual machine, we'll walk through and actually install CentOS. And one of the things, if you're going to install CentOS 7 or any other operating system onto basically a physical machine, the process is going to be the same way once we get past this creating its fixed medium here. And what it'll do, you just, hey, boot from disk, load new operating system. So if you know, it's a pretty simple process. And if I'm going too fast, or if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know.
Quick question: what other flavors of Linux do you support? I know it does Ubuntu, but what other flavors of Linux do you guys support besides CentOS? Because CentOS is going away.
Yeah, CentOS 7 is going away. I mean, it's still supported to like, believe what, next year? It's yeah, the end of life support for it. Yeah, it is sunset. You can run this on CentOS 8. We've ran it on Stream. I've ran it on Rocky Linux. Ubuntu's always good. Everybody runs that. It runs great, phenomenal on RHEL. You know, so and RHEL really, a lot of organizations, they like to pay for that, like support for RHEL. All right, so you know, hey, RHEL does have that actual back-end support that you can get your subscription fees for. So, and like I said, depending on what organization you're with, I know for SOCOM, for instance, or DoD, they have authorized Red Hat, which is the RHEL. They've also authorized CentOS, and there's other little flavors of Linux that they're looking at authorizing, how we need to authorize to keep it updated, things of that nature. So it's really just dependent on your enterprise network department on what you can and cannot run. But for our purposes of hey, let's figure this out and just run this, which I highly recommend you do at your house. You can just sit there all day long and play with it, figure out the different things you can do with it, and break it. Then shift it over, and then you can, everything you've learned, just like, oh, I didn't know I could do this. This is interesting. Then you can just shift it over to whatever that environment is. But I hope that answers your question. Yes?
You can run this, you can run a server on a Raspberry Pi, right?
Yes, absolutely.
How well does that, how does that do?
Well, there's, basically the way you would run it on a Raspberry Pi is run it as a headless, because you're going to try to run as minimal resources as possible, and it really depends on what you want to do with it. So if I want to sit there and push tons of man-A data through a Raspberry Pi, it may not. You may not even get some FMV pushing through it. It just depends on how many nodes you have and what you're trying to do.
So you wouldn't host it on Raspberry Pi?
I mean, you can. We can talk offline later, because there's some really cool things that we've been able to accomplish, like, hey, slamming a Raspberry Pi in the back of a radio and then using that as a service instead of run around with a laptop on my back or something like that. So, yeah. Anything else? Any other questions? We got 2 minutes.
Rob said that Rocky is certainly on the back of
There you go. So I know that there was a while with the Rocky we were trying to figure out how to make it work. There's a couple extra commands that you have to go through SOCOM SOMPI, the SOMPI department for SOCOM has done a phenomenal job of figuring out how to make Rocky actually work with TAC server. There was some stuff some couple little weird things you had to do. There is an actual complete user guide on how to do it, so it's pretty easy. So,
are there like setup guides and/or hardening guides for security purposes for like using Ubuntu and other things like that out there?
yes, there are hardening guides that are out there, because I know a lot of times, I don't know if you guys remember, but several years ago, whenever you would actually spin up a CentOS machine, you had your different layers of STIGs you could apply right there. Well, they did away with that. So I'll give you the, and I'll post that later on. I'm glad you brought that up later on about like, hey, the actual hardened way you can do it. I know there's a lot of things on Git that you can, actually install that'll actually harden it out and stick it out for you. One of the good things though, I do, if you're looking at actually stigging things out or hardening your actual Linux environment, straight up follow what like DISA and everybody else is trying to say. And that's probably the best way to do it, is just say, hey, let's just make sure I'm stigged out,
Do you have the technical documentation as to what ports and protocols you have developed in order for this to work?
Yes. Oh, you're talking about for like actual Linux or just TAC server, or for this? For VirtualBox?
Just for the TAC server.
Oh, just for the TAC server. Yes, absolutely. I have every single port, the types of protocols, and also whenever we get down further into that, I mean, I have all that broken out for you guys, and you'll see it exactly what you're asking. But yeah, the ports and protocols, typically speaking, unless you actually go in and change it or you want to do something different, they're going to be pretty much the same every single time. But you do have the options and availability to change your ports and protocols to what you want to do. So, and I'll actually go over that and like tell you guys, hey, if you do want to change a port, let's just say I don't want to use the standard 8089 SSL connection. You can change that to something else, but you have to remember, if you change it, you're going to have to change it in the core config file. You got to change it some other files and stuff like that. But yeah, you can, in going over like a lot of the different ways you can ingest stuff and feeds, you'll definitely have to go in and add your own new ports. So, but I'll cover that later on. Cool, so now that this has actually gotten kind of spun up, took a little bit, we're gonna go ahead and start this thing. From here, you're gonna click start, and this is the initialization process after we just kind of went through and built this. It's gonna start this VM up for us. So, as you can see here on mine, I had already loaded up my ISO, so it's already mapping to where I had that ISO. So you can always go download whatever you want to use, Ubuntu, Stream, Rocky, it doesn't really matter. And then wherever you save that ISO, you're going to map to that ISO. And that's what it comes in that format. From there, as you can see here, I already downloaded it all. But if you wanted to save it somewhere else, this is where you would actually go to where that medium is going to be at. So I would click like add, and then from here is where you just start going through wherever you actually saved it. If you can see right there, that's where I had it. Click open. And then from there, since I already had it, I'm just going to cancel right out of here real fast. I'm going to click start. We're going to make this a little bit bigger for everyone. So as you can see here, this is what you would see if you actually took a USB or a DVD disc. People still use those sometimes. This is what you would see if you actually needed to just install an actual operating system on your actual machine itself. Same process. So now that we're here, we're just going to walk through actually installing an operating system. So I'm going to click up, install CentOS, click OK. Let's make this a little bit bigger here. just go into scaled mode. Now we can actually see what's going on. This is where those multiple displays come into handy these days. So it's the initial welcome screen. You're going to go through. Obviously, for our purposes, we're going to be clicking English. But you can it supports like tons and tons of other languages. So since this is another cool thing I figured out the other day, I was like, why is my mouse not moving? So here, we're going to go ahead and pause this little guy. So if you guys run into this running any virtual machines, you got to change. Let's just save the state real fast. You're going to have to change your input device, all right? It's just one of those little things. It's like you're not going to know unless you do it. So from here, I'm going to go over to settings. So I'm going to change the settings here. Go down to network. I want this to actually, because we're going to talk about this first. Network, I want it to be bridge mode because I just want it for this. I just want it to pass through, use the IP, and it's just making its own gateway connecting to, you know, whatever LAN or WAN I am using, and it's going to issue that IP from the actual router that you're connecting to. So you may have, if you try here in the hotel, you may have some problems because the hotel has that splash page. So I don't know if you guys signed in to the hotel yet. It has a splash page, and then it's, you know, hey, enter in your, you know, conference ID or room number, anything like that. Well, it doesn't really work that way with the virtual machine. So if you guys run into things like that, that's a nifty little like, oh, well, that's interesting. So from here, we're going to also figure out what NIC we're going to be using. So you can see I've got tons of them, but we're going to be using my wireless adapter. And then for our actual interface devices, we're going to click here, click OK. Let's go ahead and just turn this off real fast. Start this. We'll go to headless start. So in order to actually make any changes within your virtual machine, you are going to have to actually make sure it's powered off. You can't just run it in a safe state. So if you can see here, now I'm going to click back over here, click close, power off. So now it's powered off. We're going to move up to settings, move all the way down to system. And this is that one little part because you guys may have like come into, you know, problems with your user interface, network, like your actual keyboard, mouse, or anything like that. I'm using a Bluetooth mouse. So from here, I'm going to click on USB tablet. Click OK, let it stay. Then we're just going to power it right back up, normal start, and it should take us right back into that install page. All right, I think just go ahead and move this over. So now you can see I can move my mouse all the way over. So we're going to click continue. Let it pop over the other setup process. Here, try to click where your date and time is. Time does matter, especially when you generate your certificates later on. So make sure you're not like a day, 3 days behind, things of that nature. Installation source. From here, it's auto-selected, but if you're actually using it on a physical machine, you'll have the option of going in and checking where your hard drive is. I want it to actually install to here. So from here, I'm going to click Done. It's already there. Software selection. So from here, this goes back into your Raspberry Pi question. I would probably want to do like a minimal install. But GNOME Desktop, usually the one I go with, because then it gives you the entire desktop, different applications. You're going to click on GNOME Applications. And it's just good practice. You don't have to do it, but to throw in your compatibility libraries, maybe some development tools. It just depends on if you see this as being a TAC server only type of machine, or if you're going to try and throw some other things on there to run in the background. Like maybe you're going to be running like some Python scripts to translate things into COT or something like that. You may want to have some other things on there. So now we're going to click Done. It's going to give it a second. It's going to verify its installation source and software selection. There we go. Now we're going to click installation source. Now, one of the things is that happens a lot. If you're reinstalling an operating system or anything like that, especially on like an actual physical machine, this is going to be used up. So you do have the option. You're like, hey, I want to use this. You're like, cool. From here, it's not going to pop it up, but it will let you know that there's already something on there. There's like an operating system on that partition anyways. So you have the option of going in and saying, hey, reclaim space, and then you can just wipe the machine, and it'll actually rewrite overall that other previous operating system. Click Done. From here, we're going to talk about the network. You don't have to change the host name, but later on, if you're actually trying to manage your networks and things of that nature, it's good to actually name it. So, but it doesn't technically have a bearing on it, so we'll just call this TAC server. And click Apply. And so for the Ethernet, or if you have like a wireless connection, anything else you have, it'll pop up here. Just click On. And we're just going to let it run in DHCP, for right now. We're not trying to set a static IP or anything right at this moment. And what you were talking about, STIGs and things of that nature earlier, that's where it used to be found, was underneath the security policy. It's no longer there. So, and then from there, we're going to click Begin Installation. Once it's going through and doing all of its installation, this is where you would actually go in, set your root password. So whatever you would want to call it, you would set it here for the root user. And make sure it's something you remember. That doesn't look right. There we go. Maybe it's this one. There we go. And you're going to create your actual user, your everyday driver that you're going to be using to actually admin this. We'll call this one Mission Planner. We're going to make him an admin so that we'll be able to go in and use the sudo commands. We'll enter in a pretty decent password here. Done. And then that's basically it. Now it's just, watching the paint dry of your actual operating system going through and installing. So the same process, the exact same process as if you're going to be actually replacing the operating system on any of your other physical machines. So, you guys got any questions? Anything? No? Cool. Since we don't want to wait for an hour and a half on that, I'm going to go ahead and stop that one. Close. power off. So it does take a while, and usually the longer it is from when you downloaded that ISO, the longer it's going to take to install, run your updates, and things of that nature. So if it's always good to try to just grab a fresh copy of whatever operating system you're going to be using and just use that one. So let's see here. We're going to run as post yum. Here's our post install. Let's just start this guy up. So we're going to fast forward in time real fast. Yeah. Boom. So once it's all installed and everything goes through, it will pop up. First time you try to log in, it'll pop like a user acknowledgement page. Like, hey, do you acknowledge just a standard little EULA? There we go. Boom, mission planner. So from here, I already went in, acknowledged the actual end user license agreement, said okay, and it's powered up and everything else. And once it initially powers up, you're going to get these little welcome messages, and you can just click through them, click next. Privacy. This depends on what you want to do. If you're going to be adminning like your WebTAC and running your WebTAC from your physical location of where this machine is running, you can leave that on, or you can turn it off if you want to. It's just, that's completely up to you and or what your organization wants you to do. Typically, I like to turn it off. And we're going to skip that. Start using CentOS Linux. And one more. So from here, now that we actually have this thing spun up, it's installed, one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to go through and make sure it's updated. So from here, we'll go sudo yum, all right, yum update -y. Enter in your sudoer, ISSION. Oh, it's got other things going on, fresh install. So you can just let it sit for a little bit, or you can actually go in and kill that PID. We'll just let it sit. But very specifically, a yum update, I'll let it figure itself out here in a minute. Like I said, depending on how long ago you actually downloaded it, it could take a while. I think when I was doing this, it took about an hour, about 45 minutes to an hour to pull down the entire yum. So we'll go ahead and kill that. Other things we can do while we're in here, you're talking about your ports, things of that nature. We'll wait for our firewalls because you may change that up a little bit later on, depending, like I said, you can change that to whatever you want. So it doesn't have to be like the standard, like I only want TLS going through 8089, or I may want to have another TLS connection on 8088, which is usually a streaming TCP. Don't necessarily like streaming TCP unless my transport's encrypted. So the other thing you can do now that you have like GNOME desktop, you can also go in and run the update through its software update via the system utils. So it just depends on how you want to do it. I'd rather just go through the terminal, let it run its update. Let's see if it's still rocking and rolling there. There you go. So once you hit that, it's going to pull down all of its update packages. Basically how like Microsoft pushes out lots of updates and breaks everything, and then you got to wait. So, but this could definitely take a while once it goes through and updates everything, or it may take a little bit later. So it's got about 325 updates. Yeah, we'll just wait. And we'll spin up a post-yum update. So from here, this is why I was saying why it's very, very convenient to run these virtualized containers. We'll just power that down. And from here, this is my post. So after you do your yum update, oh, I'm logged in as root. Let me just log out real fast here. After you do your yum update, you're probably going to go through another typical thing a lot of people do anyways is the EPEL release. So that's all the extra packages and repositories that attack server also relies on, has to pull upon. So from there, let's just log in. There we go. Whenever it's ready. There we go. So from there, we're going to do the yum, the EPEL install. So sudo yum install. Release. Can't spell today. -Y. Oh. What do I do here? Oh, There we go. So while that's going through and actually installing all of that, the other thing that you would want to do is figure out what your IP is, right? So that way you can use items like PuTTY, WinSCP, things of that nature. Actually get in, transfer your files back and forth. So we'll do a if config, same thing as an IP config if you're using command prompt in Windows. This will go through and tell you all of your actual IP addresses, and there's mine right there. So this is WinSCP. The reason why we use WinSCP a lot is just for ease of access. You can also go through and generate PPKs and everything else, import those in. It depends on how much you want to tighten down your actual environment. So from here, we're going to click on a new session, enter in the IP, and what I say it was, 118.212. So the differences here is like whenever you're usually running in the VM or on your actual machine and you're logged into Linux, you can, really good idea to not run it as root because you can jack a lot of things up. Also, if anybody gains access to it and you're still logged in as root, it's just a bad day. For myself, what I have found is that whenever I'm using WinSCP, PuTTY, anything of that nature, simply because some things like to transfer over and not transfer over, you know, with a sudoer instead of root, I usually log in as root, do what I got to do, and log right back out. So for our purposes here, we'll just log in as root. We're going to accept new connection. Oh, and 5. It's separate software. You can just go and download it. We do have, I did drop all the links on the actual, I think either syllabus or on the virtualization. So, let's see if I have the link on there. Nope. I don't. So if you look on the syllabus, the actual download link is on there. Pop that back up. Yeah. So one of the reasons why, because like I said, I'm coming from the SOCOM community, WinSCP is authorized, and it's authorized on a lot of the SOCOM SIE builds. So it just makes sense to use what we had. And so that's one of the reasons why we use WinSCP, PuTTY, things of that nature, because that is actually on the DML that SOCOM provides. And so we just use that. And then after going through, you can use other things like the terminal. It's like you can get that off the Microsoft Store, the terminal. So yeah, let's go back over here for reading view. So, and one of the cool things about WinSCP, like I said, it does other types of file transfer protocol. If you want to use like, you know, SFTP, just regular FTP, SCP, it just depends on what you want to use. You can do that. If you want to like use WinSCP to access like your NAS Terra station, you can do that too. And then transfer all that over, then transfer that over to your TAC server. You can use WinSCP if you're just sitting around. Let's just say I am dislocated from where my actual TAC server physically is, or if it's in the cloud. So if it's on the other side of the world, I can still use WinSCP to get in to access my TAC server. Same thing with PuTTY. I can go in, use PuTTY, actually run troubleshooting commands, and figure out what's going on. So it's just a very, very easy way to transfer and actually like handle all of your files. So now that we're into that, we're going to go ahead and bring up PuTTY as well. Not 118. So like I said, you can either for PuTTY, you can log in as your sudoer, you know, or you can also log in as your root. For here, we're going to log in as mission planner. Oh, let's see here. Oh, hold on. Just fat fingering it up today. Sorry, guys. There. So now that we're actually terminaled into it with PuTTY and we have WinSCP open, we don't even have to keep that open if we don't want to. We just close that out. So this is, like I said, it's a great tools to actually use if you're trying to manage any of your other servers that you have deployed throughout the enterprise. So whoever your designated administrator is, whether it's you or someone else, they can use these tools to get in there and fix things, transfer files, make updates, do what they need to do. So, as I said, using the GUI on WinSCP, you can just straight do the drag and drop method. So from here, if I want to go and search anywhere else, I can do so. Let's just open this up, go down to browse. There we go. And so let's just go ahead and map to here. We'll go to VMs. We can go to offsite. There we go. And we'll just start there. Oh, did I just back out? Yeah, there we go. So I already have TAC server loaded onto this machine. So if let's just say I didn't have it on there. I'm going to go to install 4.6. I know 4.7 is coming out. When I actually made all these, it wasn't out last week. However, there's lots of updates on 4.7 to also support a lot of the other programs. We'll go ahead and delete that. And so as you can see here, I just deleted that out, and it's immediately reflected inside of my actual virtual machine. Okay, bird that. But I mean, it's the same thing. You're just in there. So there's core. There's the actual 4.6 release 26. We'll just drag it over and drop it. Let that transfer over. So also it's a really cool tool, especially when you're jamming up certificates and things of that nature, editing your core config files later on. You can just pull it over, make any edits you have, and or directly pull over your certificates later on, so that way you can transmit them via email or whatever other means necessary. So it's a super useful tool. Common commands that we would use in Linux. Every Linux flavor has its own, whether it's apt or it's yum, or there's just several different little variations. How you want to change permissions on things. So let's just say, hey, you want to tighten down your certificates. You would basically do the different add your different values for read, write. So it's the exact same thing as running Windows. So if you open up your file inside of Windows, you can go to the properties and you can see who has read permissions, write permissions, execution permissions. Same thing, all right? So you can either do that command line, you can do it actually through the GUI inside of GNOME Desktop. Multiple ways to skin the cat on that one. You guys got any questions? Let me know if I'm going too fast. That's a great question. So, how do I say this politically correct? So I like the Docker image. One reason being is because you can add a lot of different Docker containers on it. And the Docker image, as you'll see later when we start getting into the files, the Docker image, it'll run straight off of your file. You don't need to have that TAC sudo or in there, that TAC server actually installs. It'll just read straight from if you have a core config sitting in one of your folders somewhere and you're pointing it to that core config within that Docker file, it'll read it straight from there. You can make some changes on the fly, hit enter, done. So it has its ups and downs, just like anything else, its pros and cons. So it just really depends on what you want to use it for. A lot of people think the Docker image is a lot easier, faster to deploy than because everything you need, instead of me sitting here going through and doing all these yum updates, installing all that later on, installing my Postgres and all that other stuff, it comes pre-baked already. So it just does it for you. So that's one of the pluses for it. And there's also some minuses whenever it comes into, hey, I want to go in and like really like manipulate my users. Like, hey, I want to add more certificates. I want to do different things within it. It still needs a lot more to do on that. However, the newer Docker images, they do a pretty good job of it. It just depends on your comfortability with it. If you're running it on Windows, or if then you got a lot of extra commands you got to put in. But once it's up and running, it's easy. So.
Are you loading Docker in this install, or are you going to do something different?
No, I'm not loading Docker in this install. No, I'm just using like basically just a virtualized CentOS. Yeah, and that's it.
I was going to ask, why didn't you just load the Docker image instead of doing VirtualBox if you were going to go with it?
Well, that's the same thing. The answer is, so basically, either A, I can run that Docker container and run Docker and just manipulate my files like that, but there are lacking properties that I've come across to where it's still easier for me to use just a straight up TAC server. So, I'll go in there and break a lot of different things. It's just crazy. But we've pretty much covered all of that, especially with like WinSCP, PuTTY, Notepad++. You'll see me using that a lot during this, and it's super cool because it's almost like gedit inside of Linux, to where it tells you if you screw something up. It'll yell at you. So it changes colors and things of that nature. So since I kind of flew through that for the virtualization, what we'll do is go ahead and just start on the actual server install. Like I said, I wasn't trying to go like in the weeds on virtualization. Like I said, there's so many different flavors. We could sit here for like a whole day talking about the different VMs. So from here, we're basically, using PuTTY, transfer and to do the terminal sessions, WinSCP for the files. Now we're going to actually go through install TAC server and get everything spun up, generate some certs, do some federations, things of that nature. So from here, I'm going to CD over, change directories over to where I just dropped. If you guys saw me, I just literally dropped it inside of the OPT folder. Also, you don't have to drop it inside that OPT folder. Some people like to drop it inside of their temp folder. Some people like to put it on their desktop. Just be cognizant of where you put it, so that way when you do initialize it and install it, you know where it's at. Make sure it's there. There it is. So let's just pull this back down. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to make sure we're going to basically edit our security limits file, so that we can have lots of different connections. And as you guys go through, if you download these or anything like that, I tried to make them as easy as copy and paste. So, but for our purposes, we're just going to do this just because I don't like doing it. Let's go echo. Space -E. Don't. Nope, 768. Pipe sudo. You basically only have to do that once. That just allows for multiple concurrent connections going into your machine. Now from here, can't remember if I installed the ePel or not, but I'll go ahead and do it now. Install. Minus Y. There we go. Make sure we can actually go out and reach and talk to the world. Ping 8.8.8.8. Bam. Sorry guys, I'm trying to see what's going on here. Keep going, please verify its path and try again. All right. Let's make sure we got update. Just 1 second, gentlemen. Let's make sure my network's good. In just a moment. Make sure my Wi-Fi is good. There we go. figure this out here. If not, I'll just spin up one of these other VMs real fast. Sorry, guys. Definitely not like my network. Base URL. All right. So with that guy, let's just kill him real fast. There we go. Oh, sorry, hold on. Stupid package kit. There we go. All right, sorry about that. Yes. So now that we've got that installed, which I don't know was up the other VM.
Things, you're losing the projector.
It's making it hard to read. Actually, that's a good question. Hey, do you know how to dim these lights up here? Yeah, just like these front ones or something. What's that?
Usually the house guys with the hotel handle that.
The black panel, I think, black panel. This one. Yeah, the black panel, I think they were able to use that black panel.
It's just that specific window, it's the font and the colors.
All right. Trying to make it bigger for you as well. All right. Where was I? All right, now we got to go in and actually install the our actual PG DG packages and then the PostGIS packages. Let's just highlight that. Copy, paste. So one of the things I've noticed on pretty much every user manual I've come across for tax server lately is some of the actual spacing is off. Should be it. There we go. So now it's going through and updating, installing all of your PGDG packages. From here, we're going to go in. Once we've installed all of this, we'll hit sudo yum update, make sure everything's updated and good to go. Let that cook for a little bit. While this is actually going through updating, since we've installed all of those extra packages, you guys got any questions or anything? No?
Would it be possible to stand up like a VM image and then just let's say you're trying
build off that same image? Great question. So as the easiest way, and that may be something you may want to start exploring, like Kubernetes, things of that nature, and using those Docker images. That's one of the pluses of utilizing those Docker images is for that massive cluster, right? But if you're unable to do that and you're trying to just stand up either with the VMs or with an operating system, let's say you got a Kangaroo and you want to clone it, right? What we have found, and just messing with these a lot, is that you're good to go to clone off of these things prior to your database initialization. So once you go in, yeah, because then you're going to burn in all that other stuff. You're going to start running, and then you'll run into different issues later on. We're trying to do federations, things of that nature. He's seen it, and so that is very specifically something that, because we were trying to figure out the same way, how can we, because we can't, use like Docker on these systems because it's not authorized yet or things of that nature. And so we were like, okay, how can we get in there and do a mass deployment? But we don't want to have to, this is all day long, same day, every day, right? Just like updating CentOS and reinstalling or installing Linux on this, And the best way we did it, we would go in and create some master images and install everything all the way up to the point right before you do like your schema, like, execute that actual command and initialize that database.
That's one thing that we're looking at pivoting from. I don't know whether running all this via Ansible, just have one machine, it's on the same network and have a master machine. I've got images, we're running into major concurrency headaches.
Yeah.
So 8 months from now, I can have that latest machine. But debugging that when you have a extremely wide deployments is a bit of a mess.
Yeah, it can get daunting, and that's what I'm saying. Maybe, and the way that it's moving, especially with like the massive Kubernetes deployments of it and everything, utilizing those Dockers, that's probably going to be the en masse way to deploy that, Whereas if you can't use, because there's times when you just can't do it. That's the best way that we have found to do it. Make that master cloner and go build it all the way up into that certain point, and then after that, that's when you kind of have to either designate your like actual admin, or if there's like somebody else that's going to be adminning that machine, and then they have super user access, whatever is going on, walk it through for them on how to build the rest of it. Because after you deploy that database, you shouldn't need to actually, let's just say you're in an enclosed environment, you don't need to reach back out to the world at that point. So.
How would that impact federation config?
The federation config, and that was one of those things that was getting really messed up, was the federation, because it's seeing the same thumbprint after you've gone through and you set up like the TAC server, and you're trying to federate multiple devices, like multiple machines. Let's just talk like, we're 20, 30 machines, and it starts stepping on each other, because it's like, hey man, this is the same fingerprint as this one over here, so I'm going to kick this one out, So, yeah. And that was just basically the best way we have found to actually do that, to get around that. So, like I said, if you are able to use Docker to do like massive deployments like that and utilize the clusters and Kubernetes, stuff like that, which I am not an expert on Kubernetes, but that is the way to go. So just to help clean that stuff up. Yeah.
You said there was some issues that you encountered with the Docker?
Yeah, there was just a couple things, especially if like I want to go in and I want to create like, you can go in and do it, and there's ways to do it, but there's just certain things, if I'm trying to manipulate like really advanced stuff inside of TAC server, or I'm trying to get in there and troubleshoot things, because I can't necessarily just, and that's the other thing with Docker. If I'm running Docker on like a Windows machine, right, or something of that nature, I'm really going to have to open up some pinholes. And if I got to manage that machine, then, and I don't have physical access to it, then definitely going to have to open up some pinholes on that. And the other thing that we found out, it's been an ongoing issue. If you're running Docker and like using WSL2, it's pretty much a local host only machine. Strictly because like WSL2 doesn't like the way it's natting. So you'd have to switch back over from WSL2 to WSL1 on that Windows machine to then use Hyper-V Network Manager to then bridge and get in there and actually connect to those machines. So, yeah. All right. I know, right? So now that we have basically the main basic requirements installed, we can go ahead and install the actual attack server. So cd over to obt, list it out. So from here, sudo yum install. See if we can get it out. -y. So while I'm doing that, let me bring up the actual file structure of this. You can see it's right there. Reconnect. Because I spun up the other one, sorry. So obviously, attack server, the RPM sitting right there. We're about to go ahead and install it. So many passwords. And as it's going through and installing this, you'll see, we'll just refresh here. Once it's done, it'll create its own TAC folder. It also creates its own TAC user. It just installs it, assigns its privileges as well.
The default install location is the place where you add.
Right, so the default where it's going to actually install this is, it'll install its own folder. It'll be called TAC, and you'll see it pop up in just a second. And then that's where everything runs from, is from that TAC folder. And you'll notice one of the things it does install is Java 11 and OpenJDK 11. So previously, way back when in the TAC world, it was running on like previous versions of Java and things of that nature. So what it does, it also installs Java 11. And I'm going to show you guys here in a second. You'll have to go in and physically, once it's done installing TAC server, the package has been installed, what you're going to go in and do is actually switch that over, your default Java, which is probably 7 or 8, and you're going to change that to actually use Java 11. It's taking a little bit. I don't have a super beefy machine, so. Man, it's taking a while. There we go. Ah, goodness. All right. So now that it's finished, we're going to jump back over. You can see here, let's just refresh it real fast. Boom, there's that TAC folder that you were just asking about. And then inside of here is where TAC lives and breathes. So there's a lot of things in here. If you'll notice, we don't have a core config file in here. And this is where also we have to go in and make our certs. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So from here, we're going to change directory into that actual folder that was just created when we installed TAC. We'll go ahead and put that there. We also now need to change our Java over, like I was just describing. So we'll hit sudo alternatives space tac config Java. Yes. Right. So as you can see here, it's for the initial CentOS install, it installs Java, and then just by default it'll be on, version 8. So from here, what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and click number 3 or whatever the correlating number is on your actual machine. Hit enter. So now that is now switched over, we can continue to go in, set up our databases, and finish out the configuration. So from here, we'll use sudo. You can either drill down directly into the folder and run it from the folder, or you can just run the command where it actually runs that shell file out of just the command. What I do want to do is actually show you guys pt tac db utils. Hit list. You'll list everything out, and this is where that actual you go in and it initializes that database and creates your the actual COT database, and all that other good jazz. So from here, we're going to go ahead, hit sudo, and we'll run tac server sh. Now it's going through and initializing the database to set everything up, so that way it'll be able to start pulling, pushing, serving up. So also, these are good commands to also remember, specifically if you're running massive amounts of data through your server. So your database, depending on how much you're using, your database will get chewed up, especially if you're running like archive settings, you're federated, lots of mission data coming in, your database will fill up and it'll get chewed up. So one of the things that I use a lot, it's going out and clearing out my old data, clear data. You can also archive it, save it, back it up for later. So depending on what your organization stipulates, you have to archive that data for. Also, this schema manager.jar, just common things to think about later on. If you upgrade your TAC server later, you're going to have to go back in and reinitialize your schema manager. You just basically hit upgrade, it'll go through and recycle, and if you've upgraded your actual tax server, and then it'll reinitialize that database for you. Oh. Now from here, we'll go in, reload our daemon. And we're going to start the tax server. So notice, once I start this tax server, there isn't a core config in here right now. What it'll do, it'll pull from the example and it's going to generate a generic core config file. And then I'll show you later on how we'll look at that core config and edit it to our liking. And now we're going to tell it that we want tax server to start every single time we turn on the machine. So say you take a power hit, for some odd reason your machine goes down. It's always just good, but you don't always have to do this. And we'll back out of here. CDOPT. Oh shit. C. There. Now that's all set up. Now we need to go in, generate our certificates, because tax server requires root certificates and permissions to actually run, become a secure server. The first thing we need to do is we're going to go in and edit our cert metadata file. So you can either do that via here from WinSCP if you're, basically IP'd in. You can also do this through the terminal if you choose to do that. If you're savvy at Nano or Vim or VI, whatever it is on the command line terminal, you can do it from here. You can also do it directly on the actual GNOME desktop, and you can edit it that way. And basically you would just go right back down to your file folder structure, and it's the exact same thing as using WinSCP. You're just in the file folder structure and you can go in and edit it up. Boom. As you can see here, we go down to OPT, TAC, and certs. So you can either do it this way, directly on the Linux system, open with other application. Usually, like I said, I like to use the gedit right here. So, oh, why can't you do it? It's probably don't have permissions to sudo. Or you can also do it from here. Cert metadata. Edit. Notepad++. There it is. So what we're looking at here to generate our certificates, and this basically tells you, hey, what your certificates are going to be. Like it'll be your CN, your actual organizational unit. It's giving you your thumbprint. So if you don't edit these out, then it is going to come back while you try to generate your certificates later on and tell you need to go edit this. So it is a process you do have to do. So from here, we'll say Texas. Yeah, we're in Texas. Let's just say AU for Austin, organizational unit, TPC, and we'll call it offsite. So one of the things, if you guys go through and if you don't, it's just something weird that like you can go in and change how many characters this recognizes. So like for country, state, things of that nature, it's only 2. You can change it to be 3, but if you try to like, for instance, we were working with with CanSoft one time, and they're trying to enter in CAN, right? We're entering CAN. What's going on here? You know, it's just CA. So it's just one of those things. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, you know, because you build so many of these things, and it's just stupid little things you'll forget sometimes. So always got to have your book with you. So we'll go ahead and save this. Close that back out. Says completed, just to make sure we're good. Yes. And there it is. Now we're going to go back over to here into our terminal. You know, he's still running and cooking. No, that's not the guy I had up. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and generate some certs. So we need to become the TAC user to generate these certs. So we're going to sudo. Actually, we probably need to drill down into our actual folder. So change directory, opt, TAC, certs. So you have to run this command from this folder. So now sudo su TAC, become the TAC user. And you'll get this little bash prompt. That means you're actually sitting in there, you're ready to go as the sudo or TAC. So right here is kind of a good little stopping part, because there's multiple ways you can set up your TAC server and different ways to connect. And that's something like, hey, as an organization, or if you're the TAC administrator, you should think about, how do I want my end users to connect? Do I want to just push out certificates? Do I just want to let it, hang out there in the breeze and just everybody just can connect, which is never a good idea, for TCP. Or you can do certificate enrollment. You can use Active Directory to validate. There's different things and different ways you can set up your validation for certificates. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and set up the TAC server to utilize not only certificates, but we're going to set it up to use enrollment. So just like you guys saw earlier and you connected to the offsite server, you can set it up to then authenticate any certificate requests to actually validate against that TAC server. So from here, we're going to go ahead and make our root. And so this, whenever you name this, your root CA, make it very unique. I highly suggest you don't name it TAC server. Name it something else. So we'll just call it offsite. We'll just call it off. 22. I like that. There we go. Just keep it simple, stupid. There we go. Now from here, we're going to make another cert. And we're going to make an intermediate cert. And this is going to be that intermediate signing cert that basically if someone's trying to enroll for a client certificate. And we're going to name this intermediate tack offsite. We'll say that. So the reason why I'm not just, I know you guys have probably seen it in the past. If you guys are familiar with this process, why I'm not naming it just intermediate, because we just identified it earlier. It's all fixed now in one of the newer iterations of attack server, to where if you did name your intermediate signing authority intermediate, somebody else did the exact same thing, then it's going to basically kick the other one out. So that has been addressed and it has been fixed. Joe McKettrick and Josh Bloomberg, they did an awesome job and got that revved out real fast. So it's going to ask you, do you want to, all your future servers and client certificates, do you want to utilize this cert to basically sign it? Yes, you're going to say yes. Now we need to actually create our server certificate. We're going to say server, and on this one you can name it tax server, which is highly advisable, and you'll see later on why in the core configuration file, because that's what it's pointing to, is the actual tax server JKS. You can change it, but if you change it, you need to remember what you named it, and you'll see it later on in the certificates that are actually generated, but you have to go into the core configuration file and change it to match that.
Question about the certificates.
Send it.
So, my understanding of the certs is that more or less their teams any and all traffic that other people that hold the same cert as yes?
Yeah, so that's a, yeah, so I know it's very common practice to just share a certificate, all right? Try to want to lean away from that, even though it's like easy access, man, and that's why even if you've seen like the auto configuration, like, you know, mission packages file, you know, it's just that one cert, like TAC user 1, right? You can still make a mission package for cert enrollment and then say, hey, I've got like, you know, tactical group 1 through, you know, 1, and tactical group 2, tactical group 3, whatever, and then break it off with those user managers. And I'll show you the newer updated user manager functions later, and name it specifically so you're not sharing that.
So, piggybacking on that, is there a way to create a domain hierarchy from those certs? Say, super user cert can see all traffic from that subordinate.
Yeah, you're talking about like group filtering. So very specifically on group filtering, and super cool tool, you'll be able to, instead of having to go in command line, like, you know, previously on other iterations of attack server, you can actually use the user manager interface. You can, you know, so even if I'm like the admin, which I'm, you know, obviously assigning user groups and stuff, I can still go back in and give somebody else like another admin privilege, right? But I can also assign all these different groups and group lists and filter groups to that admin cert. So if I'm on WebTAC or anything else later on, I'm still tracking all that traffic, right? So same thing, you can go in and tag and make, you know, whatever user groups you have and assign it simultaneously as you're jamming up username, password stuff, like put them part of this group. Then later on, whenever you're saying, hey, I only want them to see XYZ, I don't want them to see ZYX, then that's how that works. Yeah, but it definitely helps for user management, for what's that word? Accountability. So for accountability purposes, that is a huge deal, because they're like, something's going on and you're just got like, I don't know, this user over here is TAC user 1, but 20 other dudes are TAC user or gals or TAC user 1. I don't know who did that and when they did that, you know, what's going on here. And then later on, and this is something that's really becoming prevalent as, because it's not as easy with like if you're tying in like Active Directory or LDAP, you know, something of that nature, but later on as more like that massive mission command system that we've been working on, that's something you can't use, you know, sharing all that around, because now Timmy over here just got done editing Bob's Cop. Why did Timmy over here edit Bob's Cop? You know, so that's something that's trying to start shifting away from that. But it is like easy button, right? And I get that. Especially having to deal with operators. Like I've dealt with lots of operators and they're like, well, I don't know why. I should just give me the file and then I can just give it to, you know, my buddy over here and then we can all, you know, mission plan and then go out and operate. And it's like, you're like, dude, hold on, you know. So, yeah. I get exactly what you're saying. All right, so from here, we're going to go ahead and just make some initial certs, some client certs, and we're also going to make an administrative cert. So from here, make cert. Client, we'll call this one admin. Then we'll go back in, create another cert. We'll just call this one TAC user, since we were just talking about it. Now from here, we'll exit out of there. So another thing is, if you forgot to become SU TAC and do this as TAC, you can either do it from the command line or you can do it straight from the file structure. And as you see here, there was no files folder, right? Now that we've gone through and actually made certificates, there is now a files folder. And in here is all these certificates that we just made. And if you notice, we'll just look at this guy, open him up, let's just go to properties. You'll see the owner in the group is TAC. So let's just say I totally just spaced out, or I'm in a hurry because I'm doing 20 different servers right now. And I did this as mission planner or whatever your actual administrator is, right? Then you can change it either here inside of WinSCP and do it recursively for all the files in that folder, right? So I can go back and I can do that here and say boom, and I can change it right here. And then you hit set owner group permissions recursively. That'll change all those files inside of that actual folder. Or you can do it inside of the command line as a change ownership or a chown. Just like that. You can do chown, TAC, and basically star, you know, with your, and saying, hey, I want all those files inside that folder changed. So there's multiple ways you can do that. But if you don't do that and it's running as like your, you know, initial user or your sudoer that you were using, you're going to have problems. It's not going to run right at all. You're going to be like, why is this not connecting? I got timeouts on, you know, my connections. I can't federate. You know, there's all kinds of weird little things that's going to pop up that's going to cause problems. So if you do find yourself to where that is happening and you're like, dude, I went through and made everything, first thing you need to start troubleshooting, where you need to look, is on those certs and who owns those certs. So, because it can get frustrating. It's just one quick little thing. You're like, oh, I totally forgot to do that. So now that we have actually gone through and created our certs, our initial certs, we're going to go in and actually change over our admin cert. We're going to make our cert that we said admin, we're going to give it admin privileges. So change directory, we're to OPT, TAC, and we're going to go into the utils folder. Now from here, we're going to be using the user manager. This little jar file right here. So we're going to go Java space -jar user man. Actually, I probably need to be a sudo. Then we're going to say cert mod, which is certificate modification. We're going to give it the capital A for administrative privileges, and now we're going to drill down and we're going to point to where what we're actually wanting to change and give it different privileges. So OPT, TAK, certs, files. And from here, I said it's the admin, and we're not going to, we're going to change the actual .pim file, because that's what everything pulls its information from, you know. Because later on you'll be loading your P12 files. This we actually need to change the PIM file. And there it is. And let's just say I want to go ahead and assign that TAC user client cert I have. I just want to go ahead, since I'm in here, let's assign it to a group, and this is also going to create that group for offsite. So we'll just use an offsite as the example. So sudo java jar. Here we're going to say we're going to make a group, so we're just going to use the -G, or you can type out, you know, group, whatever you want, G, and we're going to say offsite. We're just going to call it offsite. Now we're going to tell it what file we're actually changing it and adding it to that group. Boom, there it is. So also like within the actual user manager, you can go in and say, hey, I want an output group, or I just want to assign it to this input group. There's just more robust things you can do within there. You can also use the user manager to go in and create a user. So I want to create a username and password, right? So kind of I'm not going to go into the weeds on that, because that has now really been kind of handed over to the user manager interface on TAC server once you get it up and running. So, and we'll cover that later. That's why I'm not going to cover making a username password with the user manager. However, it's still there. Now from here, we're just going to do a service restart on the TAC server. TAC server restart. Probably need to be sudo. Boom. So the reason I did that is because I did go in, make a lot of changes, and do a lot of things like that. You don't always have to do that, but it is a really good rule of thumb to do. Hey, if I'm going in and making massive changes, editing configuration files, giving different like privileges or administrative privileges to different certificates, things of that nature, it's always just a warm fuzzy. Just run and restart real fast. So now that we've gone in, we've done some basic configuration for this, we can go in and edit our core configuration file to reflect the changes that we did. Like I said, we wanted to do certificate enrollment, so that's what we did. So we can either do that, you know, with Vim, VI, Nano, gedit. I'm just going to use WinSCP. Since I'm in here, I'll go ahead and move this over to right here. So my files, we'll just refresh that. I'm just going to drag my files over and put it right here. So all those certificates I just made, I now have a copy of them. And so now we're going to go in and look at our core configuration file. So, excuse me, within the core config file, there's going to be several different things that you're going to look for that you do need to edit. So some of them, depending on how you want to run your server or what you're comfortable running your server on. So if I'm like on an open network or I'm not running it behind some sort of encryption or anything like that, I may not want to run streaming or standard TCP, right? It's probably not a good idea. And don't think there's not actively people out there hunting for attack servers using like Shodan or something to try to connect to. There is. So that is a thing. So one of the things I like to do is just change this up a little bit. We're going to go ahead and comment this out. And you see, using Notepad++, now that I've made some edits in there, until I change this and I close something out, it's going to go ahead and say, hey, the entire thing was edited. And now I'm going to go ahead and close this little comment out right there. It goes right back to, okay, we're good to go. So one of the other things I'm going to do, I'm going to add a TLS port. So you can either name it something crazy. You can, it doesn't really matter what you want to name it. But for our purposes, we're just going to keep the X509. Actually, let's call it offsite. And so one of the things that I've noticed, dragging and dropping, cutting and pasting, because I mean, I don't know, I'm not like wicked smart. I'm not gonna like remember every single protocol, every single thing to do. So it's always good to have kind of a cheat sheet. It's, it's too much going on up here. So one of the things that you may come across, and this is just, hey, just keep this one in the back of your mind. If you are using something, a configuration guide, whether it's the PDF that comes with TAC server, you're using a training guide, if you copy and paste especially an XML over to your XML file for your core config, you will come across weird little variations, especially with like spacing and or your quotation marks. And I'll show you like an example of that later. So if you're trying to start something up or something's just not jiving, go back in and just look through whatever you did on that input you just did, and that like nothing's wonky looking. And the reason I bring that up, because that happens a lot. One of the ~1 trouble calls I get is, hey, I copied this over. I did exactly this, and I did exactly the instructions. I was like, hang on. Look through your core config, and I want you to look specifically at the formatting. And so, just food for thought. So from there, we just said, hey, I want to create a TLS protocol, so basically an encrypted protocol using 8089. And like I was saying earlier, you can change that to whatever port you want. You can say, I want it on 4889. It doesn't matter. Just make sure you change it to something that's not being used. So another one, it depends on if you want to use your username and password for a login, is this connector port on 8080. So TAC server does support like, username login if you're especially with a web GUI, either with WebTAC or you, for like administrative purposes, you can use a username and password. Typically, I don't like to do that, but it is available if you do choose to do so. I'm going to leave this 8080 port open, so that way once we initialize and get into the web GUI of it, you'll see it screaming at you that there's an unsecure port open. So you guys can actually see that. The other thing, now that we went in and we changed how the actual certificates are going to use, and we're going to cert enrollment, and we also want to use the certs and the cert enrollment. So one of the things that we need to look for is this. If you scroll down in your core config file, you'll see your security parameters. And it's going to basically be pointing to where all of your key store files are, what it's supposed to be authenticating against, and we're going to change that, make a couple little changes on it. So the one that we're looking for, because we did change it, and if you remember, if you can't remember whatever you changed your certs to or your files, you can always go back in and look to see exactly what you changed it to. All right, so here we changed it to trust store intermediate offsite. Okay, cool. So here we're going to go to, instead of trust store root, which is your typical, if you're just going to run certs, that's it, it's going to be your trust store root. You don't have to really change anything if you're just running certificates only. So from here, we're going to change it. Trust store intermediate, TAC, offsite. Make sure it's not capital. No, not. And we're going to hit save. So now that we have all of that done, before we get into a little bit more whiz-bang stuff, which actually we probably should already, we're going to go ahead and change out on for the certificate enrollment part on the actual server itself. So basically, we're going to point the certificate enrollment. So it's asking for, hey, an acknowledgement. Hey, send this out to me. It's going to check against your revocation list and everything else. It's just doing a call for your certs. What we need to do is change the actual certificate signing, and we're going to put that up underneath this dissemination key. So here, we'll just take this guy. In fact, I've actually got a good example. So here, basically we're looking at it and we're like, hey, we're telling the actual certificate signing CA is going to be the tax server. The things you do need to change are going to be basically what that key is. So we'll go in and change this here. Value. And we're going to call this the offsite. So here's a nice little example, since I did a copy paste. That little guy, those little quotation marks right there. So we also need to change the key store signing file. So instead of the intermediate signing, since we changed the name of it, we're going to say intermediate offsite signing. And you can also change, so anytime somebody enrolls for a client certificate, this is also where you would change how long it's valid for. Right there on the 30 days, 10 days, however long you want to do it. So I'm just sanity check right here, should be good. We'll open our terminal session back up. Since I changed the core config file, I'm going to run another restart on it. And hopefully I didn't fat finger anything. So basically, tax server is going to tell you if you did fat finger something or something's not right after you make any core config changes. And we're going to find out real fast if I did. Yep, right there. So, just one second. We'll just go ahead and delete that. Open that back up. That should be good. We'll just go ahead and do this. Boom. So this is also one of those things I use lots, because I deal with so many tax servers. Like if I've got a known good config file, I'm going to use it and then just transfer it over. It just makes life so easy. Let's just get rid of that. There we go. Store intermediate, tag offsite. Always have to put that in there. All right. Oh. No. Make sure that took. Yes. All right. Oh, it's still doing it. All right. Let's come back to that because we can also set up the enrollment via the GUI. So we'll just do that. CRL. While that's doing that, we're also going to start loading our certificates, our administrative certificates, into whether you want to use Google, Firefox, it doesn't matter. The process is still pretty much the same. So here, we'll go down to Settings, Privacy Security, go down to Security. Then from here, we're going to click on Manage Certificates. You're going to import the certificate, the admin certificate you just made. Oops. So we saved it here. Here's this guy. We're going to scroll down, select All, and there's our admin certificate. Click Next. So if you guys remember, whenever we did actually generate our certificates, I didn't change any of the passwords or the default passwords, which you have the option to do when you're doing that cert metadata file. You can actually go in and change the default ATAC password. You don't have to, but you can. So it's going to ask for that password. Click it there. Click Next. Let's just see if this thing actually wants to play right. Oh. So this is, let's just get rid of this. All right, so if you guys see what I did, I just went in because I was giving me problems, totally just pulled out that core config file. But what it'll do, every single time you start it, if there's not a core config in there, it's going to pull from that example core config and give you a generic core config. So here, oh. We'll just make another input. There it is. Name equals. So what I'm doing right now, I'm just going back in and creating that secure port that we can log in with our cert. And going to change our Trustor root. There it is. Now we should be good to go. So now that I have the web GUI up, one of the things I'm still not going to be able to connect to my web GUI to even do this setup because I haven't even opened up any of my firewall ports. So what we're going to do, since we have our terminal open, we're going to go down and we're actually going to do a lot of the firewall commands inside of the terminal, or you can do it on the GNOME desktop. So for us, this is what we were discussing earlier, all of the ports and everything else. They're pretty standard unless you change them. So let's just go ahead and do some drag and drops real fast. And on this guy, didn't get all of it. So now we opened up the 8089 so we can use our secure connections, and there's a list of numerous other ports. These are pretty much all the same standard ports that you're going to be connecting to. So the ones to pay attention to is also going to be like the 8443. Even though, like, let's just say I established my 8089, SSL connection, that's just a handshake. That's all it is. The rest of that data, once it's like, hey, I'm cool, I'm part of the club, all that data is then going to shift over and start being transferred on 8443. So we have to make sure that's open as well. So same thing with our Federate ports, port 9000, 9001. Later on, if you're running FedHub, it's going to be port 9100 and 9102. If you start bringing in any extra network streams, all right, this is super important. You're going to have to go in and tell it, hey, I want this port open. Either I'm coming in on TCP or I'm just blasting at you via UDP. You're going to have to remember to open those ports. So right now I'm just going to go through, up arrow, make sure I get all of my basic user ports rocking and rolling. Oops. And we'll open up 9000 and 9001. So now that we've gone in and we've actually opened up these ports on our firewall, we need to, in order for them to, take and basically go from a runtime to a permanent, we need to restart our firewall. So we'll go sudo service firewall restart. There, we should be good to go. I'm going to go ahead and open up WinTAC real fast, make sure I got some decent connections. At the same time, we're going to go ahead and try to map over and get into the actual administrative page of the server we just created. So you're gonna, whenever you try to get into the web page, to the web GUI, you have to tell it what port you're going after. So we're going for the secure port, 8443. Close that out. So whether you're using Firefox and or if you're using Google Chrome, it will pop you and prompt you that, hey, it just hasn't validated. You literally just created these certs. It hasn't validated those self-signed certs from TAG server. So you're going to go ahead and click Advanced, Proceed, and then it'll drop down, and will give you the availability to select the cert you just made. If you're like me, you probably have 20, 30 certs in like web browsers these days. So Always try to name it something particular for what you just did. From here, you're going to go through, actually click OK to accept your little end user license agreement. And now you're able to go into the web GUI. There's several ways you can do this. If for like basic use, hey, you're not super comfortable going in and doing all these crazy things, you can also go to the actual setup wizard. So with the setup wizard, which is really easy to use, just backspace and go to setup. Here, this is like the easy button of setting all this stuff up, is going in. So several years ago, we didn't have this option. You had to go in and just hand jam everything. So from here, all you need to do is just simply click begin. Do you want to create a secure connection? Even though we already did that, we can go in and say yes, port 8089. If you want to, change how you want to do that, you can go in and change that later on, but this does like the basic configuration for you guys. Then from here, you're going to click next, security configuration. So here, since we went in and actually pointed to that intermediate CA for the certificate signing, it's already got it in here. So if you make changes inside the core config, it's going to be represented here. Same thing, if you make changes here, it's going to represent itself back in that core configuration file. So we're going to click next. So this also provides you the options of using LDAP. You can use LDAP, so if you want to set up an LDAP server later on, which helps, especially with Active Directory, all right? And that's a whole nother beast in itself. I'm not really going to get into that. But there's easy button LDAPs, man. A lot of guys that have like NAS Terra stations, Synology, QNAP, whatever you're using, there's an LDAP built into that. You can just create your own thing right there. Or you can go out and just create your own LDAP server. You can use Active Directory. Right here, we're going to go ahead and skip. Federation. Do we want to turn federation on? Do we want to talk to people? Do we want to integrate and play nice with people? Yes. We're going to turn that on. No, we won't be integrating with legacy servers. I don't really know. Does anybody know of anybody running any legacy servers right now? No? No one? All right. Now from here, I'm going to go next. Base URL is correct. Save configuration. And we're going to go tack home. It's going to take you right back to the start. So you notice it's still telling me alerts. The following ports are unsecure connections. That's on that 8080. That's because if you look inside your actual core config file, like I was telling you guys about earlier, it is still in there. Very specifically, so you can use your username and password. You can always just get rid of that. So for here, I just wanted to leave that in there so you guys could see it. We're going to go ahead and comment that out. We're going to go ahead and X out of that. And then we're also going to validate, that's why I opened up WinTech. We're also going to validate that, hey, I can actually connect using that 8089 and the certificates I just made. So from here, close that out. Go to Manage Server Connections. If you guys have been playing with TAC Server for a long time, you know there's multiple ways to connect. You can use mission packages. You can also use username, password, certificates, things of that nature. So from here, we're going to go ahead and add an item. We'll go offsite, address 192.168.118.212. And we're just going to do the basic certificates for this at this point in time. So the one we made, Trust Store Intermediate Offsite, select that guy. Password. Now we're going to install our client certificate. And what did I say? Trust TAC user? Yeah, there we go. Boom. And click OK. There it is. So we know it works. All right. So we'll leave that up for just a moment. So now that we've actually got a running base version attack server up, we'll start talking about some of the extra configuration things you can do. Does anybody need a break? Quick little water, head break, anything like that? I mean, we've been going at it for a couple of hours. Well, all right, why don't we take 15 minutes, everybody come back, and we'll continue on. So I was discussing earlier about the client connections. They talked to ATAC class earlier and the WinTAC class earlier. Like I said, there's numerous ways to connect. You can do it through, and it's pretty much the exact same way with ATAC and or WinTAC, TACX, same thing. And that's really, if you guys saw earlier how I did it, it's just right here, super easy. Wherever your certificates are saved, excuse me, and or you just point to them, and that's it. So we also will, if I have time later, I'll discuss making these mission packages, which are just zipped up XML files. You can drag and drop it right on the screen. You can use ATAC to do just an import with it, and it configures everything for you. So, and those are actually really helpful whenever you're just trying to help somebody to connect to your server that just has never done it before. And you're just like, hey dude, just drag and drop this on there. So we're gonna skim through that just a little bit. We talked about the certificate, like basically loading them into Chrome and Firefox. Firefox, it's the same process. It's just they have their own flavor of what it looks like and how to get there. You just go to the settings process, install your certificates, enter in the password, and good to go. And it's up to you whether or not I used to say Firefox was better at using for, doing a lot of this stuff with whether it comes to the web GUI or WebTAC or anything like that. Right now, they're about neck and neck and even. There's not one or the other that I prefer over the other as far as managing any of these servers or using WebTAC or anything else like that. So, all right. So now that we're already in here for the basic server configurations, we went through the wizard. We're about to discuss the user creation. So this is something else that, like you were discussing earlier, kind of helps mitigate that. And you can do a bulk user creation too. So that's really cool as well. All right, so that's a good question. So we're not going to have time to get to it today, but it's the exact same thing, just two different servers, right? One's your database and one's just your other core. It's advised that, hey, if you're going to be looking at running anything under 500 users at any one given time, just use a single server, right? If you're going to be running, or if you're running massive amounts of data, right? Because data can get really crazy. If you're pulling on like global traffic for like air, maritime, ground tracks, traffic signal lights, it just depends on what you're doing. You may want to look at using a dual server too. The dual server, for anything over 500 users, so 500 plus users, you should use the dual server setup. So you can have that database, give it its own specific resources, and then the front end core, its own specific resources. Yeah. Here's quick navigation for those that aren't familiar with it. Just a quick navigation through the actual tax server web GUI here. Over here to the right, you do have basically, hey, this is your navigation menu. Click on data. Here's where you can send like mission packages. So if you create like a ConOp or a mission package, KML file, anything like that, you would actually click on this here. And this is where you can upload one and then send it out to specific users. Oops, right there. Like I said, I don't have a beefy machine, so it's like screaming at me. But so from here, you can see I'm connected. If I had other users on there, other clients connected, you would see all of them right there. I can say, hey, I need to send over a mission pack or a data package. All right, and this is where you would actually be able to go in, upload it from your actual host machine or your computer and send it out. And you can send it to whoever you want to. Just real quickly, just some general navigation around the menu items here. Your video feed manager, this is where you actually go in and you change and you upload your video feeds. And you can host your video feeds. Mind you on this, tax server doesn't host the video feeds. All right? It is merely a gateway pointing to, all right? It's like, hey, users, here's the video feed. This is where it goes. So you can do UDP, RTSP, RTMP. There's multiple, raw, HTTPS, HTTP. Pick your flavor. It'll push it over to that. You just have to go in and map it over to it. So supports the XCheck. Lots of dudes love the XCheck. Utilizing XCheck on your actual client device, you can then connect up and run XCheck from here and track it on the actual web GUI. So situational awareness, you can export a mission, export basically take what you're doing for your actual missions and export a KML feed. So if you have something else that you need to import it into, it'll present you and populate a KML for you. WebTAC, that is the thin client for TAC. So what we're concerned at is configuration. So here, this is where your input and data streams are and things of that nature. Since we pulled everything out, we had the import wizard do it, or we could just hand jam it earlier with the core config file. This is where you would see your input streams. Streaming data feeds, that's kind of a newer thing added to tax server in 4.6 and later on 4.7 and so on and so forth. And that is where you would add in, if you have like ADSB coming in or AIS coming in, or if you've got something else, coming in, APRS or something of that nature coming in, you would add that into these data streaming feeds. If you have any other ports you want to have, like, hey, I don't have to, but I can. I'm gonna basically take out a totally different configuration and assign this actual port to this group over here, or I'm gonna assign this port to somebody else over here. You do that here at your add input on your server ports. So on federation, this is where your federation server, where you would actually create any outgoing or incoming connections, manage your groups, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. So I'm just kind of skimming through some things right now because we are limited on time. But the manage users, that's a great little tool. I'm so glad they did this. So with the manage users configuration, this is where with your certs and or username and passwords, whatever it is you made, you can actually manage this. Remember how I said, I'll just immediately with the user manager CLI tool, I made a new group. So I made a new group. There it is right there. I want to make a user. Here, I'm going to call it Jim Bob. We'll just call him Jim Bob. His password, we'll make his password CTIMISSIONPLANNER. So here, your password actually, if it doesn't meet the password requirements, it's going to yell at you and scream at you, hey, it doesn't meet the requirements, change the password. So, for instance, we want to create new user. There it is. It's like, dude, fix your password. So, We'll go back. Color. And while we're doing this, we can also create a new group. If we want to put Jim Bob in Jim Bob's group, we can put Jim Bob in Jim Bob's group. If we want to add him to the offsite group, we can do that. Let's go ahead and just make a new group real fast. We'll call it his lonesome, whatever. All right, Jim's group. We'll add that there. Now, very specifically, we can, here's the famous ADON group. We can keep that there. And we can give Jim his own group. We want both. And we only want him to receive anything coming in from offsite. So if we federate with somebody else and we're like, hey, we only want this offsite group, and he can only receive it. He can't send out to it, right? So think of it as kind of like a MCON, whatever. So we can put that there. We can put, hey, he's going to only transmit out on that group. But he'll be able to go both ways in his own group. So if he's got his buddies over here, he'll be able to talk to them. So I hope I'm answering your questions you were asking earlier. Yeah. So we'll keep Jim in Jim's group, and we'll also add him over to the offsite group. And then from here, we'll just go ahead, create new user. Jim Bob's been created successfully. And so now, with this new GUI, we can also go in and we can view and edit his groups. Oh, well, he's part of these groups. Well, let's go ahead and give him another group. Let's just give ADON out, update. Boom. And you don't have to run the restart utilizing this user group manager. It does it on the fly for you. And where you see this, very specifically, if you want to go back in, look at your actual, where this is pulling its data from, it just wrote this. Let's update that because it defaults to a user authentication file. But let's just open this up, and we should see Jim Bob in there. Oh, there's Jim Bob right there. So, like I was saying, it does it on the fly, and then it'll also stipulate its different group lists out in things of that nature. That's why I didn't really go into the whole CLI groups management thing earlier, because this is way easier, like way easier. So, we'll just pull him back out of there, update. And we'll keep it like that. Now, for group management, we can do a bulk user add. So from here, let's just say we want to add TAC user 1 through 20 or something, or whatever. You can go in based upon whatever your call sign matrix is, user matrix is, however you've already predetermined that with your associated users. So we'll call this one TAC. For you guys following along, this is also in the curriculum builds and the actual documents that we do have up right here. And it goes through and basically tells you everything about it. It's a super useful tool. So we'll say TAC. User in, right? And we got to use this little guy. Nope. Basically, this is its starting and stopping variable, saying, hey, look down here lower for the value. Why do I keep on hitting that? Start with 1 and with 10. And we want them all into the offsite group. You can do that just like that. Create new users. So whenever you go through and do this bulk user creation, it will then spit out a randomized password list for you one time. You can either then take all those passwords, save them somewhere, something like that, and then based upon whatever the user is, you can send it to that user and then change it later. Or you can go through, if you have the time, and just change it right there on the spot, Ricky Tick. So there it is. And then there's my password list. Let's open. And so it'll blast out these little generic passwords. So super, super useful tool. And then from there, now that we have all of these guys, we can also go back in and just make sure my config file, I can't remember if I got that going or not. Administrative. Well, security authentication. So this is that other place where you can actually do this right here. And there's your Microsoft Active Directory in there. So you can go in there and look at that and do all that as well. It's a little more of a robust type thing because you've got to do a lot of work on the back end with Microsoft inside of ADUC to do all that. But once you get all that set up, then you can go in and do that. I've got like template files also associated with how to do that, and working, like actual working files just as a template for you to use if you want to explore that later on. So here you can say, hey, I want it to be 30 days, 10 days, 5 days, whatever I want. The signing key, let's see, what did I say it was? Attack server intermediate JKS, something of that nature. Intermediate offsite siding. There we go. Intermediate. Failed to modify signing key store file specified as nice. Oh, fat finger or something. What's that?
I don't think you need the first slash.
Just search. Oh yeah. There you go. Yay. All right. Thank you. So there. Now what we can do, we'll go back in. Run a quick little restart. The user connection, the client connections, they'll come up first before that web GUI with the with Tomcat running. So, but while that's doing that, I'll go ahead and delete this guy, and we're going to make a new one. We're going to check enroll for client certificate. Let's see, let's just do that. Make sure we're back up. Oh, just waiting for it to do its thing. And basically what I'll do, I'll just use TAC user 1. password. That's just interesting. Let's just see if it's a backup yet. Node offsite 192.168. Make sure it comes all the way back up. It's a little slower run on this VM.
So you just.
There you go.
Trust store and the username, password, and then is the user you created.
Yeah, so basically just the user you created, yeah. You know, same thing. So you can use another program that if you load on top of your attack server called Let's Encrypt. You won't, at that point in time, there's a lot of little modifications, there's lots of documentation on it. But you don't have to load your trust store if you use Let's Encrypt. So it'll basically just do everything for you. If you're not using Let's Encrypt, then you're always going to have to load that trust store, whether it's the intermediate or the root or whatever you name it. You're still going to have to load that. All right, let's just, so we see that up. Let's make sure everything's pointed correctly. CA, tac. All right, cool. Attack user 1. Maybe timing out. Hold on a second here. Either that or I'm not entering the password correctly. Oh. Yeah, so either I'm fat fingering is just not wanting to pull that. Let's just do this. I'm gonna go over to here. So if this doesn't jive, I may have forgot to open the port. And looks like I did. I think I even have a note in my instructions here to say to open the port. So, let's see here. Yeah. Anyways, let's just do this. I'm sure it's running. 446. Yeah. Duh. There it is. That was the port. I'm telling you, man, you forget certain little things. It's always good to just have that referencer up. Oh. So, easy day. So that's all it was, just the port. But obviously now that we have all of this, what it did, went straight in and it just issued myself the client certificate. Back to what you were talking about earlier, if I was going to do Microsoft on it, you set it up for that Microsoft, you go in, you actually map it to that CES service on Microsoft and use, there's a whole nother rigmarole that you got to do. You probably use like a service name. You'll create a service account, tie that so that way it can then go in and actually authenticate the users within that service account, something that touches all that actual OU. So you can do it that way as well. So now that we have this one up, we're going to go ahead and switch on over to federating. I'm going to start another server real fast. Let's just do a normal start. I don't know what IP it has. So while that is doing that, what we'll do, we'll go over to our federation server, and we need to make sure it's enabled. Usually if it's not enabled, you'll see it. It says, hey, federation server is not enabled, and you'll have to go down and edit the configuration. And this is where you do it. So if it wasn't, you would just go in, click enabled. From here, designate what port you want that federation server to run on, the feder to run on. Typical ports 9001. If you want to allow group mapping or automatic group mapping, this is where you would actually select it. You just go and collect, we'll just hit federated group mapping. So this is a kind of new to it, is the data package and mission file filter. Simply because you do have those mission packages that have connection files in them. So, and that's usually within a preference file, as we'll talk about later on how that data package is handled by your client machines. And you can go in and actually filter that out now. So if there's like, hey, there's something on here that has a whatever, actual naming convention or whatever I tell it to, or an extension, I want it to just block it. So that way, whenever there's federated missions going on, I don't necessarily want them to be able to hit data package download, and then that federated data package gets sent over, and then they can connect directly to my server. That pretty much, why would we need to federate then?
So I have two questions, and I'm not super familiar with the federation side of things, so bear with me.
Yeah.
First and foremost, can two servers that are federating between each other share user groups?
Right, yes. So that's how you would map the user groups, okay? So, and that's what, we'll talk about here in a minute when I say with the user groups. Let's just save this. If I wanted to create an outgoing connection, I would, create one. Let me get there and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. And you would say, hey, I want to map off this user group, group 1 to this federated server's group 2. Then you would use user group mapping and say, hey man, what user group, talk to your other admin, or if you're the admin, then you should know. But like, hey, what user group do I need to map to? There's also automatic group mapping, all right? Usually it's easier to use, you can use automatic group mapping, especially if they're your servers and you don't mind. But if you're dealing with other entities and other personnel and stuff like that, you may not want to use automatic group mapping. But you can say, hey dude, what are you running as your group for your dudes that we're about to go on this op with, Oh, they're already assigned a group, 1-1. Okay, cool. I'm gonna map my group 2 over to your group 1, and then you're rocking and rolling. Yep. Now I get this guy up and running. That's just want to get in and find out what his IP is real fast. And this is the same thing. So if you have data coming in, like you're streaming, data, air asset coming in, ISR, what doesn't matter, whatever you have coming in for those input streams I was telling you about earlier, you can federate that over too based on group lists. So, hey dude, I'm actually already pulling all this stuff. Hold on a second, let's map this over to your group.
So does that just pass for the connection, or will, like let's say you have two servers. Server number 1 has access to the server number 2 does not.
Yep.
Just by limitations of the deploy network.
Yep.
How does server 2 give you a video feed then?
So server 2, so you can forward that over, but if you're already running on the limitations of the video network, then it's not going to crunch that video down for you or anything like that. So you still have to take into account whatever your transport mechanism is. If I've got like 4 up or 2 up and 4 down, which that's really prevalent out there, especially on operations, then probably not going to be streaming over FMV on that, especially if I'm trying to run it off, because I'll piss somebody on the satellite group off and they'll just turn me off.
Plus, the big example of the problem, what if it's, when we have the layer 2, layer 3 traditional network stuff, we get the video to the packet locally. Server, can we use application local routing to get that back over to the secondary, the federated?
Are you talking about FMV specifically? Oh, so with the FMV, man, I think the best way to push that FMV, you can run. That's a tricky one, man.
Yeah, there's still a way of upsetting the
dude.
architecture on one.
Yeah, you would just have to go back in and just continue to run it like that, or use a different broker. And then if you're running a different broker, right? So let's just say you're running a different broker to help with that FMV. Especially if it's freaking multicast, Lord knows, then the best thing to do is just point both servers to it and let that take the brunt of it, right? So that way you're just like, hey, we're mapping to this. This is like if you're running like a Makito or something, right? And then this is actually going to be serving this up. We're just pointing to it, that is thus far probably the better way. Now there's other ways to do it, I'm sure, but like especially for networks that we have certain ways we have to do things, all right, and that is like the number one headache. And it's like, hey, you were told to run it like this, all right, and it's like, well, you know, you can do this, and we need to have this signed off on. Okay, so just run it the way you need to, let it run the brunt of that, and then push it through there as a service, right? So same thing, if you're pulling one in from like an MPU5, let it run as the service from that MPU5, and then use that MPU5's IP and push that into it. So that way, that is bearing the brunt of it. You're just serving it up the address. So, make sense? I think it does. 1148, cool. Crap, what did I just say? So here I'm just GUIing into another server that I've already made. This is a completed server. Let's go over to Federate Certificate Authorities. So you're gonna have to do both for both of the federates. You're basically going to have to change your ca.pim. So that is what you're after right there. You're not trying to send them over your tax server, like your actual server PIM, or file, same thing on your clients, because you don't want them to be connecting to your server. So that's why we're just letting the server shift that over, and it's keeping it separated. So from here, we're gonna go, this is the one I just spun up. So choose File. We're gonna navigate through, go all the way down to here. Files, CA-PIM. Open that guy up. We're going to save it. Now you can see it. Off 22. There it is. And it gives you everything you want to know about it. Hey, and all that stuff that you set up through your, whenever we initially made our certs, there it is. So now I'm going to go over to my other server here. Go to Federate Certificate Authorities. Upload certificate. And find the one I made for that guy somewhere. Those install completed. Single files. CA-PIM. Click save. Now from here, you can either go in and manage your groups from this specific instance right now. You just tag any groups that you want to have on there for that PIM, and it just stays constant, or you can do it whenever it makes connections. So we're going to click back over and go to Federation. Same thing for this guy. So as soon as he came online, he already reached out to another server that I already had him federated with. And I'll tell you the different ways after I get this federated to show you guys on ways you can do federation to help mitigate a lot of stuff, because sometimes your IPs change a lot. So hold on. So we're going to create an outgoing connection. We're going to call this single IP address 1. So you can also enter in like a host name too. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be an IP. So it all resolves with some DNS. So. We're going to go port 9001. We're going to go ahead and set it enabled to true. And we'll talk about that later on. I'll talk about different ways you can federate and why you would federate that way. All right. He's enabled, connected. So since I already sent my PIM over to there, I initiated the connection. So right here, enabled. And now, if you look over here, he's got the server up that I just actually made. So currently right now, you're going to notice there's no data flowing on it, right? Because we haven't gone in and assigned groups. So the default group, that pretty much the magic group that everybody can actually get on, and everybody passes data back and forth, everybody's happy, that is the specific anon group, all right, for your anonymous group. So if you're like me and you're stickler and you are trying to help manage massive streams, massive different groups coming in, users, you know, hey, I need them to see this asset, but they don't need to see this asset, then that's when your groups start coming in, right? Especially for different geographical locations. You know, Timmy out in Japan doesn't need to see what's going on in South America, you know, but they are running off the same like network. So just because I have it in a cloud somewhere and they're able to access everybody, or they're federated, and I have that anon group going through, it's just like vomit coming out. It's like everybody's going to see everything. You don't have that control, that granular control. So I highly recommend, once you get more proficient with doing all of these, play around with the different filter groups, different user groups, things like that, and get kind of smart on it, because it's very, very important that you understand how to do it instead of just that anon group, right? So from here, what we're going to do, still nothing going on, we're going to go up, edit groups. And this is what I was talking about with the group mapping. So this is the server we just created. We're going to have the group offsite. I want to push it in and out to my other server. Add group. And you can go in and you can change it to I only want to go in, I only want to go out, however you want to do it. I want both. So I'm going to hit add group. Now from here, I don't have that particular group. I have offsite 22. I have other things, but I don't have that particular group. So I'm going to map it. Select group, not yet, remote group. So, yo homie, what is the group that you're running your op on, dude? So that way I can map the guys that are coming in. I got QRF coming in or anything of that nature, you can map it up. So remote group, offsite 22. Local group, well, I already know that I'm running offsite. Map group, boom, there it is. So on the other server, hey, you know, what's up, buddy? I just mapped over to you, make sure you map over to me. Okay, cool. Let's just go over here, edit groups, same thing. I want him to get offsite 22. Inbound, outbound. Remote group is offsite. And there it is. You can also map one group to multiple groups, okay? That's a thing. So I don't just have to go to one group. I can have like remote group over here go to Jim Bob's group if I want, right? So I also want to do that. So let's just go over here and say, hey, let's just map another one. Remote group. What I say was Jim Bob's or Jim's group. It was somebody's group. It was some group here. Yeah, manage users. Let me just Jim's group. Jim's group. There you go. All right, so we can map over to Jim's group. Site 22, remote group. Jim's group. There we go. It's capital? No? Yes? Yep, it was. That matters. There we go. All right, and then a little pop-up down here. Boom. So, and then you can go in, select group, remove group, whatever you want to do. So from here, you're like, hey dude, we're gonna map over Jim's group too. There we go. So as you can see here, both my local groups are now attached to that remote server's offsite 22. It's pretty easy. So that kind of takes away, and this makes it way easier because a few years ago or a while back, we were having a hand jam all these groups and filter lists and break them out on different inputs and assign, you know, each user their own like specified group. So the filter group started growing and growing and growing and growing, whereas now, okay, cool, this is easy. We don't have to go in and hand jam it all in the core config, we just do it from the GUI. So it helps out a lot. So going back to what I was telling you guys earlier about federating, different ways to federate. So let's just say I have a static in place server that's not going to change, right? So whether it's on a cloud, you know, Azure or AWS, or it's an on-prem server like running on ESXi or an actual machine that stays on and supports my enterprise. It's like my master server, right? Well, let's just say I have multiple other servers that get moved around a lot, okay? I don't want my master server, my higher edge server, to constantly be reaching out trying to federate, because as soon as this server goes offline, then the other server is going to sit there and start retrying. All right, give it a little while, then it's going to retry, and then eventually it's going to just disable it, you know, because it's like, hey, it's timed out so many times, it's just going to disable that. So the best thing to do, and then if somebody pops back up and they're not the initiate, then the servers, you're not going to have that federation connect. So you're like, dude, you just got on ground, your wheel's down, where's your stuff? You know, or you're cruising around your VIC, where are you? The best thing to do is like that distant in server, that is what you really want to, you know, have the one that goes out to make that connection. It's just little caveats and things like that like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Because let's just say you have a different footprint now, or you have a completely different ISP backhaul that you have to use. Your actual IP is going to change. Let's just say I'm on a satellite. If I'm on a satellite node, that cut sheet's going to change. You're going to have a different subnet, different gateway entry points, and that's going to change and not always be the same as for your, you know, H1, H2 master server is going to be looking for. So it's just a good practice. So whoever your mobile servers are that changes, they're the ones that are set up to reach back out and make those connections. You guys understand? Any questions?
Is there like a high availability option?
Ooh, kind of like for the server side?
Yeah.
Not like a high. The only thing it has right now is like for the federation, it has like a backup federation. So like, let's just say, hey, this one takes a hit, goes down, it'll fall over to a different designated federate as its primary federate. So. All right. Trucking right along here. So pretty much covered a lot of the federation stuff, and there's different ways to federate, and the groups to federate, what you can federate. It's really easy on that aspect. So one of the other things I'm going to try, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but what I do want to talk about is the dual server configuration, since you did ask about, you know, the questions are asked about like for enterprise use, 500 plus users, 500 not plus users, things of that nature. I'm just going to speak to that based upon like pretty much right off the PDF here. I mean, because it is almost identical as far as setting everything up. Just go to read mode. There we go. So if you notice, for the dual server, you're going to need your core as well as your database RPMs, okay? Obviously, you know, you can or you don't have to. You can use WinSCP, PuTTY, things like that. It's just, man, it just makes life easy. You know, there's no sense in trying to do harder work. The main differences is on the core instance, you still have to go in and say, hey man, enable the security configuration for it to allow a lot of extra connections. So that still has to be done. The other thing, you know, is the EPIL release. That needs to be installed. It also needs to be installed on the database. Kind of what I found. I mean, you don't need it, but yes, it works because a lot of things out of that EPIL release that you're pulling out of the Red Hat repo relies on that actual extra little release. So install that. The only thing you have to do is, since you're basically running your database on the database instance, you're going to just install the actual Red Hat repo for your Postgre. That's only going to go in your database. That's it. And the setup process is pretty much the same. You're going to, you know, hey, go in wherever you saved your file, yum install, you know, tax server core, and then on the other instance, yum install tax server database. And then from there, it's pretty much identical, except for, hey, the schema manager things and things of that nature. That's going to take place on the actual database one. So in order to do that, before you even start that, you're going to update your firewall, okay? So the firewall, in order for both those servers to talk to each other, it's 5432. I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, 5432. God, I'm good. So that has to be opened up. That's the extra firewall port that has to be opened up on both the core server and your database server. So without that, you're just going to like, no database, no database. So that's what you're going to be looking for. When we were talking earlier and we were discussing the initial core configuration file, whenever you squirt up that database instance and you yum install that database, you're going to see in there a core configuration example. And within that core config example file, because it pulls the core config from there, it's going to have a password. And what you're looking for, it's right underneath here for this connection. That's where it's going to be. That's what you're looking for inside that core config. If I can get that off there. Stupid thing. Anyways, look here. Let's just open this up. On that core config, blah, 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 blah. Right here. This is what you're going to change. That guy. You're going to, on your database side, you don't have to, just put in your IP, or you can put your loop back in. But on your actual core side, you're going to put in whatever IP it is to your database. Also, if you look on your database example core configuration file, it's going to just gin up a password for you. And then you're going to have to take that password out of that database core config XML and put it inside of your core config core XML. You know what I'm saying, right? You have to do that, because if not, it's going to come back, hey, it can't authenticate, things of that nature. Those are like the massive, massive differences between doing a single tax server and a dual tax server. So I've definitely ran an enterprise dual tax server for several years for a very big component. Never had any problems out of it. It handled the workload, multiple coasts and around the world. It handled that workload like a champ. So, any questions on that?
Well, I mean, is there any plans for HA availability for
That would, I mean, I would think so. I mean, that, not that I know of on the horizon. But I could be wrong. And like I said, you can always feel free to jump out on Mattermost and talk to the actual guys that developed this and say, hey man, what's the roadmap for this? You guys thought about this? I mean, and they're super awesome guys, and they're always open to like, oh man, yeah, we didn't think about it. If you find a bug, let them know. Drop a Jira ticket, let them know. Hey man, you just did this rev. this new release came out, and I'm seeing some wonky stuff. It's not really acting the way it is supposed to be acting. At least I don't think. So that's some other things. So on some of these newer iterations, I mean, there's really nothing else to talk about the dual server deployment, just simply because that's the only difference right there. Is like, hey, just map to it, you know? Other than that, it's just easy day. So. So here, if you guys get on, I know we were talking about Microsoft CA and things like that. There's also a really good how-to guide that's very, very in-depth. You know, feel free to reach out, talk to the TAC Product Center. You can give me a call. We have like a very, very good in-depth guide on how to utilize the Microsoft CA and issue that client cert for, you know, user authentication. So it's a very specific course. It takes a while because now you're setting up Active Directory. That takes a minute. So from here, real quick, I think the one last thing that I would like to talk about is the mission packages, right? These things kind of make life easy. I'll talk to it briefly. Let's go ahead and just close all these little guys out. So with these mission packages or data packages, basically you can make them and they're like little zip files. You can put extra imagery into them, your connections. They're very useful, especially for, where's my display? Read mode, thank you. So especially for like whenever you're going in and you just want to like get a bunch of files out or some user certificates out or, you know, client enrollment out very quickly, and you can just email that over. You can text it over. However you want to transmit those means, you can do that. If you're not authorized to plug something in, don't plug it in and transfer those files. Just don't do that. So that's a big thing in a lot of different organizations right now. So you still can't. You got to burn things to a CD. So. They're very easy to make once you get a good template. I know for use just in the sample organization, they had very specifically later on like an actual little bitty tool that just did it for you. Then you can just build off of that. If you want to drop in more imagery files, XML, WMS files, you can do that. Typically, just, you know, tearing it apart, you're going to have a manifest. And this is kind of like self-contained in a subfolder, I guess, you know, is the way you want to say it. And it's basically the manifest is saying, hey, what's coming in the zip, all right? Then you're going to have a preference file. The preference file is basically telling that client what to do with what's inside that zip. So, hey, if it's like some trust store roots, some trust stores in there, or a client certificate in there, it's going to very specifically stipulate, hey, this is the password, this is what you're going to name the server, and it just automatically does it. You know, it takes a little doing on the front end, but once it's loaded for your end users, like your clients, it makes their life wicked easy. So here's an example of what one of those manifest XMLs looks like. You can go in, change whatever the name of your server is, go in and actually change like, hey, client cert zip. So basically if with a TAC user is what I had earlier, you can put that in there. And so basically all you're doing, making sure that these ignores are false. So be sure and check that. If I have something else I want to add into there, like Bing hybrid imagery or anything else like that, that's where you put it in there at. You're just saying this is what's coming in the package and then my payload. The preference file, from here, this gives, hey, how do you want to use this thing, right? It'll say, here's my server IP, my server title, the address, what protocol it's connecting on, what port it's connecting on, as well as once it reaches out and initializes that connection, the password, so on and so forth. It's actually really intuitive. And once you have a couple of these, and if you've made a couple of these, it is just pull out the stuff that you don't need anymore and just add the other ones and zip it right back up. It's super easy bake oven. So you can put your certs in there, same thing, but if any of your certs ever change or your trust store root changes, so if you make any changes to anything you're dropping in, you make sure you reflect it inside of that actual, the actual file itself, in that preference file and the manifest file. You have to change it in not only the preference file, but the manifest file. And especially changing that manifest file, that's something that gets overlooked. So, and what we have, you guys can feel free. This is also posted up on the for the curriculum. You're going to just figure out, hey, how do you want to connect? You're going to make it all up, and then you're just going to make a folder, basically, that you're going to throw everything into. Then any certs that you have, you're going to throw it all into that. And then basically from there, you go in on an XML document, utilizing your friend Notepad++ or whatever you want to use. And you just go in and edit that up. So, and that is basically it. You guys have any questions? You guys want to see what like a kind of one looks like real fast? I have one here. Stand by. Do. Well, let me find one that's already all packaged up for you. Well, I mean, here's one. So if any of you guys are connected to the actual ADSB server, so if we open this up, let's just open it up for you guys. It'll tell you everything you want to know about it. Yeah, sure. I don't even know where it's at. So there it is. So he has his trust store root in there. He has what the actual client certificate is called, all feeds. He has the preference file for the server. I don't know if any of you guys know Greg, but this is Greg's server. So he provides all of like the air traffic stuff for like EMS, first responders, stuff like that. Super good guy. Definitely talk to that dude. So from here, ADSB TAC server, and then like I said, he changed the port. That's exactly what he did. He's like, you know what? I'm going to change the port number on that one. And that's where he did. So he went into the core configuration file, changed the port. I want to make it something else. And then from there, he's like, hey, how do I want to, actually do this? And he puts in the password, and that's it. So from there, he just zips all this up into one. And then here's the manifest, and it just says, hey, what is in there? What's coming in my payload? It is very, very easy, and it makes it easy for your users. So, you guys got any questions? No, good. Well, that is about all I got. If anybody has any alibis or anything like that, I appreciate your time. And I'm always available, night or day, whatever. If you need some help with something, just give me a call. If you don't have my card, feel free. I got plenty of them. And my contact information is also on all these slide decks from the Product Center.